Most of us think we know the story of the Pied Piper. You know the one. A magical musician shows up in a multicolored coat, plays a little tune on his pipe, and saves a German town from a plague of rats. It's usually taught as a simple cautionary tale for kids about paying your debts. But here's the thing, that cheerful story about a rat catcher, it's a much more modern version. The oldest versions of the legend, the ones that were told in the streets of Hamelin for centuries, don't mention rats at all. They mention only one thing, 130 children, who on a summer day in the year 1284 walked out of their town and were never seen again. What if the rats were just a cover-up for something far more sinister? The truth behind this fairy tale is so much more terrifying than you think, because historians all agree on one point. Something happened to the children of Hamelin, and the mystery of what that was leads down a rabbit hole into some of the darkest parts of medieval history. So, let's quickly go over the story we all remember, the one made famous by the Brothers Grimm and poets like Robert Browning. The year is 1284, and the town of Hamelin is dealing with an overwhelming rat infestation. They're everywhere, a tide of vermin threatening to swallow the town whole. Just when everyone's at their breaking point, a stranger appears. He's wearing a fantastic coat of boue, or multicolored cloth, and he introduces himself as a rat catcher. For a handsome fee, he promises he can solve their problem. The desperate mayor quickly agrees. The piper raises his magical pipe to his lips and starts to play. The rats, completely mesmerized, pour out of every building. They follow him down to the Weser River, where they march straight into the water and drown. The town is saved. But when the piper returns to collect his payment, the mayor and the townspeople, feeling safe now, refuse to pay him what they promised. They laugh him right out of town. The piper leaves, his face dark with anger, and vows to get his revenge. He comes back on June 26th, the feast day of Saints John and Paul. This time he isn't dressed like a rat catcher, he looks like a hunter. And when he plays his pipe, it isn't the rats who come running, it's the children. Every single child in Hamelin, 130 of them, follows the sound of his music. Their parents can only watch in horror as the piper leads them out of the town gate, up a hill called the Koppenberg, and into a cave. The cave seals shut behind them, and they're gone forever. A simple, chilling story about a broken deal and the terrible price that was paid. This is where the fairy tale ends and the real investigation begins. For a long time, most people thought this was just a story, but the people of Hamelin knew it was a memory of a real, traumatic event. Maybe the most compelling piece of evidence was a stained glass window put in the town's market church around the year 1300, only 16 years after the incident supposedly happened. That window was destroyed in 1660, but luckily, several written accounts of it survive. It didn't show any rats. It showed a piper in colorful clothes leading a group of children dressed in white. It wasn't a warning. It was a memorial to a tragedy that was burned into the town's memory. And that wasn't the only clue. To this day, the town of Hamelin has a street called Bungelosenstrasse, which means the street without drums. On this street, where the children were last seen, no music or dancing is allowed. It's a solemn tradition that's been upheld for centuries to remember the loss. Then there's the most chilling piece of evidence, found in the town's own official records. An entry in the town chronicle from 1384 doesn't say a word about magic or revenge. It's just a simple, heartbreaking statement. It is 100 years since our children left. Historians and the townspeople agree. On June 26, 1284, something catastrophic happened, and 130 of Hamelin's young people vanished. The piper, in some form, was real. The disappearance was real. So what really happened? This is where the real story splinters into some terrifying possibilities. One of the oldest theories is that the story is an allegory for a deadly disease. Maybe some plague swept through Hamelin that primarily killed the young. In that scenario, the Piper isn't a person at all. He's a symbol of death. His colorful coat represents the sores and marks of disease, and his pipe is the call to the grave. The problem with this theory is the timing. The Black Death, the famous plague carried by rats, wouldn't hit Europe for another 60 years. And if it was a different epidemic, why would the records say the children left instead of died? Another popular theory ties the story to the disastrous Children's Crusade of 1212. This was a real historical event where a charismatic leader convinced thousands of children to march to the Holy Land. Most starved to death or were sold into slavery. So, could the Pied Piper have been a similar figure, a religious fanatic who led the children of Hamelin on a doomed pilgrimage? It's a powerful idea that fits with the religious fervor of the time, but there aren't any records specifically linking Hamelin to that kind of movement in 1284, so it's all speculation. Then there's the possibility of a natural disaster. What if the children were all gathered for a festival and got caught in a sudden landslide or a flash flood? That would explain a sudden mass disappearance and the imagery of being led into a mountain. The Piper could have been added to the story later, a way to explain a tragedy that was just too random and senseless to accept on its own. But the theory most widely accepted by modern historians is much more down to earth, and in its own way just as dark. It's called the colonization theory. Back in the 13th century, parts of Germany were overpopulated, and there was a huge push to colonize Eastern Europe in places like Moravia and Transylvania. Landowners would hire recruiters, called locators, to convince people to move. These recruiters were known for being persuasive and often wore bright, colorful outfits to attract attention, using music and grand promises to gather followers. Under this theory, the Pied Piper wasn't a magician, he was one of these recruiters. And the children might not have all been toddlers, but a term that meant all the young people of the town who had no land or jobs. This recruiter came to Hamelin and persuaded 130 of its young residents to leave for a promised new life in the East. This theory explains why the records say the children left and why they were never seen in Hamelin again. They didn't disappear into a mountain, they just walked away, hoping for a better life. While the colonization theory is the most logical, there is one other, darker interpretation we can't ignore. What if the colonization wasn't voluntary? What if the Piper wasn't just a recruiter, but a human trafficker? Selling young people to recruiters for labor in the East wasn't unheard of in the 13th century. Think about it, a town is struggling, maybe with poverty or some other crisis. The oldest sons inherit everything, leaving younger children with no future. Then a charismatic man shows up offering a solution. It's possible the town's leaders made a deal, not to get rid of rats, but to get rid of their excess population, all the hungry mouths they couldn't feed. What if they sold their own children? The story about them refusing to pay the Piper could have been made up later to shift the blame. In this version, the town didn't break a promise to the Piper. The Piper, the payment. He took the children as part of a grim transaction. This would explain the deep, lasting shame tied to the event, a trauma so great that the town couldn't talk about it directly. You can't just write in your official records, "We sold our children," but you could write that they left. The story of magic and revenge becomes a convenient fable to hide an unforgivable crime. The Piper wasn't an avenging angel. He was a predator, invited in by the parents themselves. For more than 700 years, the story of the Pied Piper has haunted us. We'll probably never know for sure what happened on June 26th, 1284. Was it a deadly plague, a tragic accident, a mass migration fueled by hope, or a dark deal born from pure desperation? Each theory paints a grim picture of what life was like in the Middle Ages. But the one thing that remains is the cold, hard fact from the town's own records. It is 100 years since our children left. They walked out of Hamelin and straight into legend, leaving behind nothing but silence, a street where music can't be played, and a terrifying mystery that still endures. The true story of the Pied Piper might be lost to time, but the theories are absolutely fascinating. What do you think really happened to the children of Hamelin? Was it a plague, a crusade, or something much darker? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy digging into the unsettling truths behind our most famous stories, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into dark history.